Maybe we look small, but I know we do not look small in God's estimation. For each of us is worth more than we could ask or think. He can use anyone powerfully. Look how he used Moses. And he was just one. And he'd failed until he was 80. And then look how mightily God used him. So let's not look at our small numbers or ourselves. Let's look at what God can do when we abide in him. When we just give him back everything that he's given to us and let him have his way. May we pray. Father, help us to be so unconscious of ourselves and any human limitations within us that we can only remember that you are here with us. You're above us. You're beside us. You're around us. But the glorious thing is you live within us. And you live within us with all power in heaven and earth. All the power of God. Everything that God is, we may become a part of. And God will do the directing. All we have to do is abide in him. Give ourselves back to him so completely that it's Christ directing our lives. It's his Spirit that's filling us, imbuing us with a new power, and leading us out into the places that he would have us go. So help us this day to live in your presence, and then go home with a new resolution in our hearts to take time every day to live in your presence and to be directed by your Spirit, that you might fulfill in each of us your desire, your divine plan, and do through even us great and mighty things to bless this world. We offer our all to you for this day. Amen. I'm sure we all know that we're living in perhaps the most crucial days that our world has ever faced. Certainly so far as our United States is concerned. For we are the greatest of every civilization that's ever been. We are the civilization that God brought into being to use today to win the world for himself. And he's given us everything we need to do it with. All he lacks are those who will say, "Here I am, Lord. I offer my very all to you." And learn how to abide in him. I love this 15th chapter of John. I didn't ask them to read it today. I'm sure the Lord directed that. But it's a marvelous picture of what God means for us. He is the vine, and we are only the branches. The branches have no responsibilities except to keep that union with the vine. They don't strain to hold on to the vine. It just grew there. They don't struggle to bear fruit and foliage and flowers. They just keep that union. And everything that the vine has is given to the branches. The vine asks nothing for itself. You'll never find any foliage or flowers or fruit on the vine. All of it is given to the branches, and we're the branches. And Christ is the vine. He's offering to you and me everything that God gave to him. Yes, each of us individually can be given all that God gave to Jesus, his own Son, but only as we learn to abide in him. And how do we abide? It's by putting him first in our lives, giving him first place. What are we giving first place to today? Well, most of us are still giving that first place to our own desires. We take time to eat, usually 3 meals a day. Maybe we nibble in between. We take time to take care of ourselves, and we should. For our bodies are temples where the living Christ lives, and our bodies reflect what's within us. Each of us is a reflection of just what we are. We don't have to go out and tell the world we're Christian. The world can look at us and know whether we're Christian or not. They tell me that in the foreign lands, and we have seen this too, you can tell a Christian when you pass one on the street. They have that look about them. They have that love that seems to shine through, and that light, that glow, that those who've never come to know Jesus do not have. And you and I, every moment of every day, are reflecting what we are. And when we're putting Christ first rather than ourselves, those around us are seeing Christ. They're seeing that spirit of love, unselfishness, that desire to serve others and help them no matter what the need. That's abiding. Now, it's right that we should feed our bodies and take care of them. But oh, it's more right that we should feed our souls and our minds. For our souls and our subconscious minds, which is the vital part of us, it's spirit, it's not an organ. Your brain belongs to your human body. But the subconscious mind, which is spirit, is the mind of Christ. And it's the mind of Christ within you that takes every thought you think, every emotion you feel, every desire in your heart, and creates in your own body the things that you've been choosing. Oh, you weren't meaning to choose all those things sometime, but you did. We choose what we are. We choose what we want to do, what we want to be. Oh, we may want to be more wonderful than we're really choosing, but it's what you're really letting in your mind that you're creating. For every single thought we think has power. Everything that's visible was a thought before it became a reality. Before this lovely sanctuary was built, someone thought how lovely it would be this way, and they had a lovely thought. It's the first time I've seen lights that represented the thorns. Aren't they lovely? It's a worshipful sanctuary, isn't it? But someone thought it. I've never seen one like it before, have you? But it took someone to visualize it and think it and then make a picture of it and then create it. But that's what we do. Every thought we have, and we picture it and imagine it and deeply desire it. That subconscious mind within us, the mind of Christ, creates it. It isn't always what we would say we would choose. But when we're watching a television that isn't so nice, and we let it get into us, we are creating that too. All the books we're reading, all the newspapers. When we fill our minds and spend more time reading the newspaper and the bad news, for that seems to be news. Good news doesn't seem to be news. But when we fill our minds with all the horrible things that are going on in the world, we're helping to create it. We're letting it seep into us and feel like, oh, well, that's a part of life. Instead of spending that time, or much of that time, with His Word, or with some of the great inspired books that we have today. And oh, we have more wonderful inspired books today than this old world's ever dreamed of. And they're written by souls that are utterly dedicated to Christ, who abide in Him, and who take time daily to listen. And God is speaking through these great authors today, even as He spoke to those who wrote the Word of God. He's still speaking, and He's interpreting the truths that have been given in larger terms, in terms that pertain to our time, that are leading us in the way. But how much time do we spend reading these great books? As much as the newspaper? As much as watching the television or listening to the radio? Well, we're a product of all that we're thinking. And when we're letting our minds be filled with these other things, we're not abiding in Him. And we're only growing spiritually and becoming a power for Christ as we abide in Him. Now, that isn't going to keep you from being a normal person. For Jesus was a normal person. He did all the things that were natural and good and right and kind and loving that anyone ever did. But oh, He did so much more. Everything He was and did was directed toward helping others. But helping others know God. For He came here to make the Father known, to make His love real, and to make us know that we are little extensions of God's Spirit. Each of us is a little extension of God. But what are we doing with it? Are we taking time daily? And you have to take it. It doesn't come natural. It just never seems to be the human thing to find time to be alone with God and feed on His Word and listen for these larger, deeper, fuller interpretation of His truths. For what's written between the bindings of our Bible, that's the foundation of all truth. But it isn't all we need for today. It was all they were able to bear at that time. But Jesus said, I have so much to tell you. But they were not able to bear it then. But today we must be ready for it. For we are living in the day when our civilization is at stake. And nothing will save our civilization except fulfilling the divine destiny for which God brought us into being. He brought us into being and has prepared us to be His agent today in winning the world for Him. He has given us this greatest scientific age that's ever been dreamed of. 90% of all the great scientific findings of the ages have been given us in this century. And the larger portion of them were given to us in the United States. But we in the United States have the privilege of all of them. But God didn't give them to us to let us just sit down and revel in them. and be his favorite children. God has no favorite children. He gave them to us in trust to share them with the whole world. And we're going to do it, or we'll be blotted off the earth, and God will have to raise up another civilization. But we aren't going to be blotted off there. We're going to do it. God is revealing his plans today for winning the world so fast that anyone that's listening can hardly contain the wonder of it. I got lost last night on my way to church. I was afraid that they'd have to introduce me and me not be there. Because I was talking to the driver and I got him so excited over some of these new plans today, and he knew the Lord was calling him into it. And he went in the opposite direction twice. We went miles in the opposite direction twice. I didn't know where we were going, so I wasn't paying any attention. I was just talking. And he was so utterly lost. After about 10 miles, he said, well, nothing looks familiar, and I know we should have come to the church a long time ago. So we'd have to turn around and go back to where we started from and start over again. It's the most thrilling thing in the world. You forget everything else when you get lost in his plan. And oh, he is revealing his plan today. And he's revealing it to every soul that will listen. That is, if you're prepared to listen. He'll not be able to tell you these greater truths until you know the truth that has been revealed. You don't get into high school until you finish the grammar grades. And our Bible that has been revealed is like the grammar grades. It's the foundation. You must have it. You must know it. But today we're in the kingdom days. And we must have the foundations before he can reveal these greater things. And he's revealing it so fast today to everyone that will listen that we almost forget the world's running around. We're just so busy listening. But he has a part for you. There isn't a single soul living today that some essential part in the kingdom hasn't been given them. And God's waiting to lead every individual soul into the fulfillment of their life plan. When we take time daily to know the truth that has been revealed and read some of these greater books that are being written today that have been inspired and are greater in applying God's truth to our times. And then listen for your part. For the kingdom will never be full and complete until all of us have fulfilled our part. And don't forget that we have God's word that every one of us shall fulfill and perfect God's plan for us. You'll find that in the first chapter of Ephesians. You know, those 3 books of Paul's, Philippians, Ephesians, and Colossians, were all written after Paul had had that great and amazing experience of being caught up into a higher realm, where these greater, larger truths had been unfolded to Paul. They are the books where you find the deeper revelation. And it's in that book of Ephesians that he lets you know every one of us have been chosen and predestined. Well, King James puts it predestined. Some of the others say you've been appointed, you've been chosen. Before God created the world, he thought you out and predestined you to be a son of God. According to his will and his purpose, it's God's will, it's God's purpose, that every soul shall be like Jesus. Be a son of God. And do the wonderful things that he put you in the world to do. And when enough of us can catch it and live it and believe it and let it just shine through us and spread everywhere we are, all the rest will catch it. It's far more contagious than a virus. But we haven't caught it very well, not enough. But it's little groups like this where God is planting the leaven and showing the way and then sending you out to spread it. And to make it so utterly irresistible and beautiful that everyone's going to want it. They're going to seek it. And just as surely as they seek it, they shall surely, surely find it. For God wants us more than we want him. He needs us, even as we need him. And we can't draw breath without him. It's Christ in you that lets you breathe. And we need him, we know that. But most of us haven't realized how he needs us. His great plan for his creation from the beginning of time has been waiting for this generation. When we're ready to understand and follow and fulfill God's desire, it's going to be. But it's going to be little groups like you that are going to do it. I wonder how many different churches are represented here today. I'd say at least 15, because I see some that have been following from many places. And I know that you all represent many churches. And if God just has one little bit of leaven that's really revealing him, that's just letting it glow and flow and serve and love, the rest will catch it. I know it happened in our church. And it only began with just two that were scorned and made fun of and did everything in the world to stop it, but the rest of them, but they didn't stop it. And in 15 years, the entire church had it. It was that contagious. And oh, how God's been using that church and that prayer group. It's the prayer group that gives you our booklets. And these booklets share the way, share the truth, and we learned every bit of it from the Gospels. That's the only way we learned to pray. We didn't know how to bring a miracle. But we learned it from Jesus, for in every promise he shows you the conditions upon which you may claim that promise. And lo, these centuries we've been trying to claim it without doing our part. Just beg him and beseech him and implore and weep and wail and see if we can't break him down. You can never change God. He's given us the way, and we have to walk in that way. And he doesn't ask anything of us that's too hard for any one of us to do. Anyone, in any condition, can always meet the requirements that God has. We just hadn't learned. We hadn't realized God needs us. I think I'm going to stop and tell a story. I'm going to show you how easy it is to fail when we think we're doing pretty well. We're enjoying it so. And there isn't anything that's more thrilling than living a Christian life and letting the Lord lead you out. This same 15th chapter of John, you know, all these things he's telling us, he said, these things have I given unto you, that my joy might be in you. And if you see an old long face that calls themselves a Christian, they might belong to the church, but they're not a Christian. A Christian place glows with his love and his joy, his peace, his light. And these long faces They really haven't discovered the real Christ within them yet. But they will discover when we make it real. Now, this story began in 1939. Norfolk opened up a new suburb. Wasn't a very large one. You know, there's water everywhere in Norfolk for 5 large rivers, and the Chesapeake Bay all flow into the ocean around and through Norfolk. But there was a little oval-shaped piece of land that was attached to the city, by a space of ground just about as wide as this sanctuary, hardly this wide. Just wide enough to be a highway or a road in. And there was this oval shape, just big enough for a home to be built facing the water all around. Just about 40 home sites. And so somebody real keen developed it. And he made the highway on the waterfront so that every house was facing the water. And then their backyards made a park where the children could play secure and no roads running around. Well, it was quite a delightful spot. And the first one to buy a lot there were the Dix family, D-I-X. Now, he had a very high position with the government because Norfolk's full of government. And so he evidently made a very good salary. And when they went out to see these beautiful waterfront sites, and it wasn't too far from the naval base where he was stationed, they bought the first site that was sold. They were a delightful young couple, many, many friends. And she said to her husband, wouldn't it be nice if we could sell these lots to just our friends and not have anybody out here in the community except just our friends? Wouldn't it be fun? He said, yes, it would. Let's bring them out. And so they began to tell their friends about it and bring them out and say, look, we have this lot. Why don't you buy that one? And it wasn't long till they had sold all the 40 lots. It was filled with just Navy people of high rank. Free just couldn't stay here long, not long enough to get entangled in anything in the city. Not too much involved in church. Now, they were all church members, but they didn't stay long enough to get too involved, you know. But they had 2 regular card clubs. Every Monday and every Friday was a regular club. They didn't have to bother about what they were going to do that day. But the other days, they just had parties. You come to my house, and we'll go here the next day. So life was a merry-go-round. Now, they did all go to their own church on Sunday, and it just about took in all the churches. I mean, all the different denominations. But life was wonderful, and Patty Dix was the center of it all. She was the leading spirit around which they all revolved, and she kept things happy and going. But Patty began to have very, very severe headaches. Now her slate was full. She didn't have time to stay home and miss a party for a headache. So she'd take more and more pills and keep on going. But one morning, Patty couldn't lift her head. And she said to her husband, this old headache really has been this morning. I guess you'd better call the doctor before you go to the base and let him come and see what he can do for this headache. Well, they were young. They'd never had any problems, and headaches certainly didn't sound very serious. And so he called the doctor and gave her goodbye and went to the base. The doctor came, but as soon as he examined her, he knew it was a tumor on the brain. And he knew it was in such a serious condition that before he even called the husband, he called Dr. Dandy, the great brain specialist in Baltimore, John Hopkins, and made an appointment for the next morning for an operation. Then he called the husband home and said, come home, I've made an appointment. You must get your wife to Baltimore right away. She's to be operated on in the morning at 7. Well, of course, he came home, and they drove to Baltimore. And, well, they were all young. He didn't look serious, you know. And they all gave her a merry goodbye and saw them off. The doctor showed her up inoperable. And he said to the husband, don't let her have any company. And don't start the dope too soon. That's all I can offer you. For her last days are going to be in great agony. And she's going to need all the dope then. So just as long as she can get by without it, don't start it. But that's all I can do for you. Well, you can imagine what it did to this community. When she came home and they couldn't even come to see her, she couldn't have company. She had been sent home to die. And so they stopped their parties. There wasn't any more parties now. They just sat around weeping together. For she was the heart of them. But Patty's sister-in-law, her husband's sister, was one of my spiritual life secretaries on the Rappahannock district. And when she heard about it, she came to Norfolk. And when she saw all Patty's friends sitting around crying, she said, what's the matter with you girls? Why aren't you in a prayer group? They said, a prayer group? Do you know what Dr. Dandy said? She said, of course I do. That's why I'm here. They said, you don't think that a prayer group could spare Patty's life now, do you? Why, she said, of course I do. Do you think anything's too hard for God? When you give him the channel to work through and lives that he can use to be his agent? Did Jesus ever fail? Did Jesus ever tell anyone that this is too far gone? Or that isn't the Father's will? Didn't he let us know that he was here doing his Father's will? That he'd come down from heaven not to do his own will, but his Father's? And didn't he heal every soul that came to him and make them every whit whole? Well, yes, but that was Jesus. Well, she said, he said that we could do all that he did on the same terms. And she said, would you all like to be a prayer group and learn how and be a channel through which God may spare Patty's life? They said, we'd do anything to spare Patty's life. Well, then she said, make a prayer group. Well, they said, we don't know what to do. Well, she said, you live in Norfolk, don't you? Yes. You remember 3 years ago, the papers were full of the healing of Bishop Walter Gum, Reverend Walter, and he's bishop now, but it was just Reverend Walter Gum then. And he was the pastor of our church that had learned how to pray, all of them. It's a world record. It's been written up in every medical magazine, a world record. And of course it was written up in all our papers. Said, you remember that, don't you? That happened in Norfolk. Yes, but he was a minister. Of course, they thought God had favorites, you dear ministers. Why, he'll do for you what he wouldn't do for ordinary people like us. That's what they thought. She said, God doesn't have any favorites. He's just as eager to save Patty's life as he was Reverend Walter Gum's life. And she said, do any of you know Louise Eggleston? She was the leader of the group that started these, that gave God a channel. One of them said, yes, I know her. Said, well, call her up. Go talk to her. Ask her if she'll teach you how to pray. Oh, they said, we'll do that. And so they called me up and asked if they could come to see me, and I said, of course. So 40 descended upon me all at one time. And then they began to tell me about Patty. They said, do you think God could heal Patty? I said, I don't have to think. I know it. He's healed me twice when I was much nearer death than Patty is. I've seen so many miracles, there isn't any kind that I haven't seen. There are no limitations on God's side. The limitations are always on the human side. Are you all ready to pay the price and be disciplined and study and learn and obey the laws? They said, Miss Eggleston, we'd do anything to save Patty's life. I said, all right, if you mean it. You find out how many of her friends will pledge that they'll meet every day. We're going to meet every day for an hour, except Sundays. And Sundays, you're all going to promise to go to both Sunday school and church, your own church. But that will be the substitute for the prayer group on Sunday. Now find out how many will give their word that they'll put it first. They won't say, oh, I've got to go to a dinner party today, or oh, I must go to the beach and go swimming. Because this began in April, and I knew summer was coming up. I said, you're going to promise to put it first. We're going to give God a channel to work through, and we aren't going to let anything keep us from meeting together and learning these spiritual laws and obeying them. We'll do anything. So I said, all right, you go find her friends, and I'll go out to see Patty. They said, oh, you can't see Patty. She's not having any company. And I said, well, I'll see about that. You see, this wasn't too many years after my second critical illness. And I was in the hospital 6 weeks that time, and I just about come to know all the nurses in Laubach. And I was quite sure I'd find a way to get in. So while they went out to collect Patty's friends who would pledge that they'd put this first, they'd meet every day for 1 hour. They'd study all the scriptures and everything I gave them. They promised to learn these laws of prayer and obey them. And I went out to see Patty. When I rang the bell, it was one of my nurses that had nursed me that answered the door. She said, oh, Miss Eggleston, I was about to call you. I'm nursing the loveliest person. She is so sweet. Would you come in and talk to her and have a prayer with her? Well, I said, that's why I came. So she took me right up to Patty's room. Patty had been put on a hospital bed. She had triple windows that looked out over the parkway, back of their homes. And I had a wonderful hour with Patty. I let her know that they were out gathering all of her friends, that they loved her so much they were going to become a channel through which God could work to bring her back to perfect wholeness. And I convinced her that she could be made every whit whole. But I said, you know, when God healed you, he's healed you as a witness, not just to play cards every day, but to be doing something for him that's going to bless others. Now, I'm not saying that he couldn't use you at a card game, because he can. You can live it there too, but not every day in the week. You're going to listen for what he wants to do with you over and above that. So she was ready, and oh, she was thrilled. And I said, now, Patty, I'm really going to teach them first the Gospels. I'm going to make them have a book that's going to be called their promise book, and write every promise as they come to it down in the promise book and underscore their part with a red pencil. And we're going to deal with their part. Every day we're going to make them know this is your part. God doesn't fail. And if you fulfill your part, there's no doubt of the victory. It will be full and complete according to your cooperation. And the nurse said, oh, Miss Eggleston, if you'll give me the assignment each day, I'll be teaching Patty while you're teaching them. And they decided to meet in the home right across the parkway, and where she could lie in bed and watch them all assemble. They could wave to her, and she could wave to them. So I had a prayer and thanked God for the victory and went back home. They decided that we would meet in this home right across the way, every day at 2 o'clock, from 2 to 3. Of course, we never stopped at 3, but that was the assignment time. I told them to bring their Bibles and to bring, each of them get a great big notebook, which they call their promise book, and that we were going to collect these promises and we were going to learn how to pray. Well, they were as thrilled as if they were going to the most beautiful party they'd ever attended. It was a new experience. All 40 were there. 40 signed up. You know, 40 is a right good number. We find it out in the Bible. 3 and 7 and 40. They're wonderful numbers, and we had 40 sign up. Well, I've never seen girls more thrilled. We started the 3rd week in April. Not one of them missed a day. No matter where the family went on a vacation, they didn't go. We collected promises, and for the first few weeks, why, they all had the same assignment. And they'd come thrilled with the promises they found. And we would talk about these conditions. Are you meeting them? Now, God doesn't ask anything of us that's too hard for us to do. The greatest thing is, are you abiding in Him? That's the first great essential. Are you abiding in Him? Have you given back to God all He's given to you? Have you lost your little human, weak, failing self in that great divine self that indwells you? For you'll never find Him in His power until you've yielded yourself, your ego, your will, your way to Christ who lives in you. And so we would talk about what that meant. And I felt that everyone was taking it in and understanding it. The first condition is, if you abide in me, or if you've given back to God all that you are, for Him to direct. And I made them know that really you're never happy and at peace and secure and healthy until you do, in perfect health. When you've given yourself to Christ, why, Christ is going to take care of this body. It's His body, it's His temple. And He wants His temple to reflect Him in His wholeness. So I made them know that. Have you given everything back to Him? Are you taking time every day, apart from this time we have together, to really read His Word and listen for what He has to say to you and grow in His understanding and wisdom and grace? That was just one condition of John 15:7, if you abide in me. The second one is, and my words abide in you. Many of us fail because we really don't know His Word. Or maybe we know it by heart, but we haven't looked at what it's saying. There's some ifs there, like in that verse. If you abide in me, and my words abide in you, then you may ask what you will. Not modified in any way. Not ask what you think I want. Ask what you will. And He didn't say maybe it could happen. He said, it shall be done unto you. That's how clear and strong and full the promises of Jesus are. But always there's two things you've got to do before you can claim it. And so we took every promise. We looked, and you don't live by one promise. You don't build a whole life on one promise. You've got to know them all. And so as we went through the Gospels, we found them all. And we took time to plan each condition fully. And oh, how I did plan love. God gave through Moses 10 commandments. But Jesus summed them all up in 2. When you love God with your heart, your soul, your mind, your strength, and that's everything you are, You're not holding anything back. You're giving back to Him all that you are. And you're loving God with all that you are. You're putting Him first, letting everything else fall in its place, and you're not denying yourself anything. You're giving yourself the greatest gift that could ever be given. You're multiplying every power within you, every joy, everything is being multiplied when you've given back to God everything He's given to you. So that's the first one of the commandments that Jesus gave. And the second one is you love your neighbor as you love yourself. Now, you don't love yourself romantically. You don't even get real emotional about how you love yourself, do you? You just want everything nice for yourself. You just want this peace and joy and happiness and health and security. All right, God wants you to have it. And you may have it as you help others to have it. But you may not have it on any other terms. Those two commandments sum up everything. When you've given back to God all that God has given to you, and when you are willing to share everything He's given to you with everybody else that He brings to you, you don't have to run out and hunt for opportunities. Never, I've never asked for an engagement or an opportunity in my life. When you belong to Him, He just throws them at you as fast as you can take them. But He'll enable you to go through always anything He brings you. But don't run ahead of Him. Don't go finding your own way. You let Him lead you in His way. And so we took all of these promises and we looked at what He's saying to us. And I asked each one to be still and examine themselves. Am I measuring up? If I'm not, ask Jesus to do it through you. If there's someone you're out of tune with, you can't love them. He loves them. And if you'll ask Him to love them through you, He'll show you how. And it'll be amazed at how He will make you understand and love them. For you'll know why they were like they were. There was a reason. And love can overcome all these things that happen to them. And love can take out of your heart what's happened to you. And so I explained all those things to them fully. Oh, I don't think we ever met less than 2 hours. They just thrilled over it. And they kept saying, well, this is more fun than any party we've ever attended. Far more fun. They just loved it. Well, after a couple of weeks, they said, give us different assignments so we can all find more of the promises, and then we can trade the promises and fill up our book. Because I let them know that the Bible has 30,000 promises in it. 30,000. And they wanted them all. So they said, give each one of us a different assignment. And then we'll trade our promises and we'll just help each other that way. Well, that's fine. But that's one of these laws. You've got to share what God gives you. You've got to give it away in order to keep it. So then I began giving everybody a different assignment. And boy, you'd have thought every day was Christmas. They'd come bringing their promises to give it to somebody else. It was just thrilling. And I remember when I gave someone an assignment in Deuteronomy, she looked like I'd spanked her. She said, now, Ms. Eggleston, you know there isn't any promises in Deuteronomy. Oh, what a surprise she had. Some of the greatest. Some of the greatest. So they had more fun learning God's Word, learning the wonder of it, getting the joy and the thrill of living in it. And I tell you, they were so busy with that and their studies and their assignments and their home duties that they didn't have time to get in any other mischief. Well, we began in April. We met every day in May, every day in June, every day in July, every day in August, And now it had come around to the third week in September. Patty hadn't had one pain since we began, not a pain. And as the doctor would come to see her, he was so astounded he didn't know what to think. He couldn't find symptoms of any tumor. No evidence. But he knew the Dr. Dandy had sewed her up inoperable. She had everything except her strength. She could have company, they could come to see her. But she didn't have strength enough to walk down the steps and back up again to eat her meals. But she was a little old thing, and her husband could pick her up in his arms and carry her down. She could eat as well as anybody, and eat as much. Then he'd carry her back up again. He could take her driving. She just didn't get her strength. But she was well, and she was radiantly happy, and so they were all happy, and they were having a better time than playing cards, and everybody seemed happy. But now it was time for me to get at my conference work. I knew if I were going to keep my conference work, I had to give time now for that. The next week I was to attend the conference committee. And then I had to visit every district in our conference. We have 18 districts. I think we had 15 then. But that meant that I had to go out to 15 different districts and lead days apart and see if these prayer groups were moving on and things of that kind. I knew I couldn't continue to meet with them every day and do my conference work. And so in my quiet time that morning, I said, now, Lord, I know with you there are no conflicts. I know there's never two right answers. There's just one right answer. Now it seems that I cannot continue with this group here and do my conference work. I love both of them. I've been having just as good a time with these young people as in my conference work. Now I want you to make the decision. If you want my conference work to continue, why, you show me what to do about the prayer group. And if you want me to continue with the prayer group until Patty has her strength, why then, make me know that you want me to do that. So when I give the Lord something, I release it. I don't worry about it. I don't think about it anymore. For if you worry about it or even wonder about it, you're taking it out of his hands. You've got to absolutely trust him completely that when you give him something, he can do it. And instead of bothering and wondering, thank him and adore him and praise him and rejoice that he has the answer. Now, I had no idea which he was going to choose, but really I didn't mind. I loved them both, and if I had to sacrifice one, why, that was all right. Well, that afternoon when I went out to see Patty, for I was still going 15 minutes ahead of the group every day, just to have a time with Patty and talk to her and be sure that she was keeping up with us and remind her of these conditions and see that she was meeting them. And when I went to see Patty that afternoon after I'd given my problem to God, I never saw anyone so radiant in all my life. She actually shone like an angel. She was beautiful anyhow. But she had a glow all about her. And I said, Patty, I never saw anybody look as beautiful as you look today. Do you feel as wonderful as you look? She said, I can hardly explain it to you, Miss Eggleston. She said, you know, I know what Jesus was talking about when he said, my peace I give unto you. Why have such a peace that I can hardly contain it? It's something you can't explain. I never felt so wonderful in all my life as I feel today. Well, I said, you show it. And then she said, you remember that in the upper room, Jesus said, my joy I give unto you. These things I have told you, that my joy might be in you and your joy be full. I said, yes. For remember, that 15th chapter of John was given in the upper room just before Jesus went out to pay the price. I said, yes, I remember him telling that. She said, I know what he's talking about. I am so full of his joy, I can hardly stand it. Well, I said, it's just radiating from you. I know this is the day you're going to be completely healed. I know it. You couldn't have that peace and that joy and not be completely healed. And so I know that tomorrow you're going to be meeting with us. And so I said, we won't have a lesson today. I'm going back and I'm going to send all of them to get any hymn book they have. And we're going to spend a whole hour singing every hymn we know that gives praise to God and gratitude and rejoices. And I said, your window's open and their windows are open. You lie here and sing with us. Well, she said, that's what I'll do. So I had a prayer of thanksgiving and rejoicing, and I went across the park and I said, how many of you girls have a hymn book? Oh, most of them did. I said, well, skip out and get them, because we're going to spend this whole hour singing. And I told them about Patty. I said, we're going to sing every Thanksgiving hymn, everything that rejoices and gives praise to God, we're going to sing for 1 hour. For what he's done for Patty, I know that this is the day that she's going to be completely healed. And so we had Methodist and Baptist and Lutheran and Presbyterian and Congregational. We had every type of hymn book, because they belong to all of them, some of them. But they all had Thanksgiving hymns. They all had joy to the world. The Lord has come. And I'm telling you, we sang for 1 hour. And we sang with all the power within us. Then I said, now tomorrow, we'll have the lesson that we would have had today. And I'm sure Patty will be with us tomorrow. So when I got ready to go home that afternoon, Josephine said, Miss Eggleston, may I drive home with you today? And I said, why, sure. She'd been coming out in another car. And so as soon as we were seated and started, she said, you know, Miss Eggleston, I haven't been sleeping at night. I said, what are you worrying about, Josephine? She said, that's it. I am worried. Did you know that Betty and I don't speak to each other? I said, what? You mean Betty in our prayer group? And you and Betty have been there every day these 5 months, and you haven't spoken to each other? We haven't spoken to each other in years. Well, I said, you knew that is one of the conditions of prayer, didn't you? Well, I didn't think God would notice that. But she said, today I know that he does notice it. And I know that I've got to get this out of my heart. And I said, you certainly have. What are you going to do about it? She said, well, it was her fault. And if you'll make her come and apologize, I'll forgive her. I said, Josephine, the Lord is speaking to you. And if it was her fault, it'd be much easier for you to make the first step than for her. And the Lord isn't going to let you sleep. You say you haven't been sleeping. You're not going to sleep until you make that right. For that might look minor to you, but that's not minor to God. He can't work through a channel that's holding anything like that in it. You know that's a condition. And I said, you promised. Every one of you promised that you'd do anything to save Patty's life. And I said, God has done everything he could possibly do with what we've given him. But Patty cannot have the complete victory as long as anyone is holding back on any of these conditions. She said, I know it. I said, all right. Will you go and make amends? No. She deliberately hurt me, and unless she comes and apologizes, I'll never forgive her. I said, oh, you'd rather see Patty die, wouldn't you? No, Patty's all right. You know there's nothing wrong with Patty. Just that's her strength. I said, Josephine, the Lord's given all he can give with what we've given him. And Patty cannot possibly have a complete victory if you're holding this. Well, she said, you make her come and apologize. I said, God doesn't do it that way. God doesn't make us do anything. But I said, he's really dealing with you, and he's speaking to you. I sat in front of her home a half hour. She wouldn't budge. She said, I never will. Unless she comes and makes amends and apologizes, I'll never forgive her. Well, I said, it looks like we've wasted 5 months. Oh, no, we haven't. No, we haven't. She's all right. I said, Josephine, we don't fool God. We pay the consequences. But she wouldn't give in. I went home, and the maid said, I have a message for you. I said, what is it, Susie? She said, Patty Dix has died. And if she told me that every member of my family had been killed in a wreck, it couldn't have shocked me anymore. And I don't see how it could have hurt me anymore. It just nearly killed me. And I forgot how to pray. I just became human. I flew to my room and I said, God, how could you do it? How could you do it? Did you ever see a group as faithful in your life? Not one of them had missed a day. Didn't you know I wasn't going to give up? Didn't you know I'd stick to them until they did face it and come through? Now they're going to say prayer doesn't work. God, it wasn't my word I was teaching, it was your word. What are they going to say about you? What are they going to say about your promises? Oh, I just poured out my heartbreak to him. I didn't see how I could face them. I didn't know what to say. And the phone rang. And Susie said, it's for you, Miss Eggleston. I went to the phone, and it wasn't Josephine, and it wasn't Betty, it was another one. She said, Miss Eggleston, have you heard about Patty? I said, yes. She said, you know, it's my fault Patty died. I knew there was a little something I wasn't admitting. I knew it was a condition, but I didn't think it looked so important. I didn't think God would even notice it. But I know now that it's my fault that Patty died. I said, well, dear, were you ever going to admit it? No. She hadn't any idea of ever admitting it. God's so merciful, you know. God's so kind. Yes, but God obeys his own laws. And he commands us to obey them. 39 called me that evening. 39. No, there was one that didn't. The 39 included Josephine. There was one that didn't. She hadn't failed. 39 were holding back something, and they knew it. They were having such a wonderful time meeting together and getting the thrill of it. And they didn't think God would notice. And not anyone but Josephine was even going to admit it. They had no idea of telling me about it, or even admitting it to God. And there wasn't anything God could do but let Patty die. I could have been on for years. They weren't going to admit it. They were having a better time than playing cards. But I'm telling you, Patty's death shocked them into reality. It was the saddest funeral I ever attended because everyone knew that Patty was meant to live. But after the funeral, they just huddled around me. They said, "You aren't going to give us up, are you?" I said, "I love you all as much as my own family. And now that you know the agony of failure, I couldn't give you up. But I've been coming out to the suburbs every day. How about you all coming into Ghent Church? And we'll meet once a week." Now, I said, "I never leave town on Thursdays, for that's my maid's day off, and I have a big family. How about let's us meet in Ghent Church every Thursday morning?" They said, "We'll do anything. We'll do anything to make amends, Miss Eggleston. And we promise you we'll never fool God again or try to." That's the group that is now the World Literacy Prayer Group. They know that you meet the conditions and you don't try to fool God. For God obeys his own laws. Well, at the first meeting, they said, "You know, Miss Eggleston, we used to spend an awful lot of money on our card parties. Now we've got to live for Patty. Don't you think it'd be nice if every week we'd bring what we would have spent on a party and something else that we've done without? Couldn't we support a missionary in her name? We've got to live for Patty." I said, "That's the spirit. That's the spirit that can take evil and turn it into good, that can prove Romans 8:28 that all things work together for greater good." And so every week that basket was in the middle of our table, and it still is. Now, we couldn't take a Methodist missionary or any other one denomination, but I knew very well the top leaders in this worldwide evangelization crusade, and they are interdenominational. And like China Inland Mission, they all go out by faith alone, trusting God. We sent every month a great big offering, enough to support any mission. We took one in Africa. And every month, all that mission needed went in. They not only gave what they had been spending in parties, but they made sacrifices. We called ourselves in the beginning the Patty Dix Group. And for a couple of years, we were the Patty Dix Group. But Frank Laubach broke our hearts with the needs of the literacy in the world, illiteracy. And so we said, "All right, Frank, we're not doing as much as we could." And he had made us write our books, and we promised that we would give all the returns from our booklets to him to teach illiterates. And when you teach an illiterate, you teach them to know Jesus. As Frank says, it's so easy to win them for Christ, you almost feel you've taken advantage of them. You don't give them anything else to read. And they want to learn to read so much that they read everything you give them, and everything you give them to read is leading them to Jesus. So we've been taking on more and more missions, but all the profit from our little booklets goes to world literacy, to Frank Laubach. And so we changed the name from the Patty Dix Group to the World Literacy Prayer Group. But Patty Dix has served the world 1,000 times more gloriously than if she had lived. For if she'd lived, they might have gone back to wasting part of their time. But every one of these but one, just one, wasn't in the service. All the others were in the service, and they've been moved all over the world every few years. But everywhere they've gone, they've established prayer groups. How the Lord has multiplied the good that came through Patty's death. So death isn't a tragedy. Death is only a stepping into a higher realm. Patty was ready to go over and be a marvelous witness for Christ. One of these witnesses that we are surrounded with. For every one of us are surrounded with a whole host of witnesses to help us, to lead us, to strengthen us. When we learn to know the truth that has been revealed, and we take time to listen, to see what God is trying to say to us over and beyond. Yes, he'll tell you individually what he wants you to do and to be. He'll show you how. He'll offer you the resources and the guidance. He never sends you out to do anything he will not enable you to do it. But most of us do not discover it because we haven't taken time to know the truth that has been revealed and listen to these larger things he's waiting to tell us. God's calling us today as he's never called before. I don't think he's ever called us pleadingly as he's calling those who will take time to follow today. And all he's saying, come follow me. I'll make you. I'll do it. I'll do it through you. I'll show you how. I'll lead you. But what he wants to make every one of us is a fisher of men. Someone whose life will be so utterly irresistible that others cannot resist it. They walk that way. Will you go home and be faithful? I can't take time to give you all these intricate laws, but Frank Laubach made us write them. He convinced us, as I was arguing, who am I to write a book? Who am I? He said the very fact that the Lord has given you these truths, he's given them in trust. And you cannot possibly keep them and continue to be blessed unless you share them with others. And so we've written 9 little booklets on prayer. And Frank made me take that title. He'd just written an article on Christ Heals Today. And I had read it, so I was glad to have his title, and I also grabbed what he wrote. This book is by Frank Laubach and me. And then he said, now, Louise, there's no use of you telling the world you believe it unless you tell them your own story. And let them know how you know it. So in this book, Christ Heals Today, I want you to tell them. Tell them all about your healing. And it's a miracle as great as any that you read of in the Gospels. As utterly impossible as any miracle Jesus performed. And so I put that at the end, but Frank turned it around, and the book begins with my first healing story. Then I've been meeting with these wonderful psychosomatic doctors. And oh, they are wonderful. They make you know that every disease and infirmity that gets beyond medical skill is something that happened in your soul. Something that doesn't look like a sin. It looks little, but it's not little in God's sight. And so they make you face the cause, and they know the cause of all these so-called incurable diseases. And in this little booklet, I share much of those psychosomatic facts. I claim there's $25 worth of psychosomatic facts in that booklet. And it only costs $0.25, but don't you dare take it out of that pack. We can't break our sets. There's many, many wonderful books out there that are singles if you don't have $2. And these 9 together are $2. But that's the lead-off book, Christ Heals Today. Then I thought I had finished. I had done what Frank said. He said, oh, no, you haven't. People want to know, what are these laws of life? They haven't been able to discover them for themselves. I want you to write another book, and I want you to begin it with your second miracle healing. And then I want you to let them know all these laws upon which prayer is based, and give them some more facts. In here I tell you something that Carl Jung said. And yes, it was Carl Jung who said this. He's one of the most famous psychiatrists that the world's ever produced. And I quote from his book, Man the Unknown. And he said that he had really had patients from every civilized part of the world. And of course he has a record of every patient he's ever served or treated. And he said, my records show that I've never had a patient, and he said they only come to me when everybody else has turned them down. But my records show that there's never been a patient that came to me with one of these so-called incurable diseases that had really followed the light all the way. And I never was able to heal a single one until I led them into the way, Christ's way, the way of love. They had to learn the way of love, and they had to follow it before I ever had a healing. And every one of my records prove that. For God is love, and God can only do these things that seem to be impossible as we learn the way of love and walk in it. And so you'll find in all of these booklets miracle stories. You'll find the laws being pointed out over and over, how we met them. You'll find out the new things. There's a miracle story in every one of them, and they're all kinds. There's 9 little booklets on prayer in this series. Now, you'll find most of them out there singly if you can't afford $2. So if you just can't afford all of them, you buy the singles. But if you want a full course in prayer, take all 9. And the 9, that's $2.25 worth, you buy for $2. And I promise you that anyone that will study all these books and obey the laws that you find in them, this Let's Learn to Pray was written about 5 years later than my prayer experience. And Frank said, Louise, you all have grown a lot in 5 years. I want you to write another book that brings out every one of these spiritual laws. And I want you to make them see that when you meet the laws, God never fails. No matter how great the need, no matter how long-standing, God never fails. And so there are 9 booklets in this series. Now, 3 of them in this series are things that the Lord drove me into when I would have rebelled if I could have. Because I was a nice Orthodox Methodist and I didn't want to be pushed out in any funny things. But he pushed me out in the subconscious. I'm sure I am the first one in the country that took a scientific law, the law of the subconscious, and made it a prayer and used it in miracle ways. Miracle ways. Now, 3 of these books that explain this is the foundation of it, are in this prayer series. So in this 9, you're not only finding all the laws of prayer, but you're finding the laws and how to use the subconscious mind. And there's the book, the 4th one in the series, that explains the laws and the power that lies within the subconscious mind, the mind of Christ. The last 2 in this series are stories. All stories in here, and they're all different. There isn't any kind of something that seems impossible that you cannot make right through the use of the subconscious. And so if you do not have that prayer series, I invite you to make a sacrifice and treat yourself to it and then live with it a while and watch what it does for you. Then I was quite sure I'd finished, for I really believe that those 9 books teach you everything you need to know about prayer. But the Lord said, Frank didn't make me do this, Frank made me do that. The Lord said, now Louise, the secret is the way you live it. When you've planted these things in your subconscious mind so deeply that it's as natural as breathing to obey, it's the way you live it that I can use you when you have no idea you're being used. As I tell my stories, you can usually see that I have no idea how the Lord's leading, what He's going to do with me. But whenever you learn how to follow Him, He just leads you in the places He wants, and He does it. Now, this series of books, Learn to Live Abundantly. There's $1.25 worth here for $1. The first one is Learn to Live Abundantly. And Jesus said He came that everyone might live abundantly. Everyone. Not one soul in the world that couldn't take hold of that abundant life if we showed them how. And that's our mission. And that will really challenge you to live abundantly. Now, the next one is We Are Chosen. And if I have a favorite book, it is this, and Hearts Aglow. Now, Hearts Aglow is not in any set. You'll have to buy it separately. But I always say, if you don't have it $1.25, buy Hearts Aglow. But this is my favorite book. This book makes you know that no matter who you are, God chose you. God appointed you. God put you here because He needs you. And this booklet will convince you that He needs you. He needs the talents He's given you. He waits to direct them. He waits to empower them and to multiply them. Now, Frank Laubach loved this book so much that he had Doris Coda put it in simple terms for new literates, for elderly people, for, well, it's a book like this. It's this size. It's 50 cents. But, oh, the print is so big that a person 9/10 blind could read it. So big and clear. It's written in language that a little child can understand and an elderly person adores. Now, there's 2 of these that Frank had put in simple language like this. One is Learn to Pray. This is Learn to Pray. The other one is We Are Chosen. I don't seem to have but one here. These are 50 cents apiece. But if you'd like to give a gift to an elderly person who doesn't see so well, or a little child that would just love it, get those books. Now, when I finished writing We Are Chosen, the Lord said, well, now you think you've finished, but this book is only half through. The next one is going to be a continuation of this. We are chosen, but the continuation is power to become. He offers you the power to become a son of God. Everything He wants you to be, He's ready to make you into. And what He wants you to be will make you happier than anything you could ever choose or imagine. He isn't asking you to give up anything that He won't give you far more in return. And this book will show you how to take hold of it. Power to become sons of God. Now, the next one in this group is The Excellent Way. That's a book that many people buy by the dozens to hand to people with a great need. It was written to show people how to find the answers in their problems. It's the excellent way, the way of love. Then thrown in with that are 15 of our cards with our poems that the Lord wrote. He just flowed them through me, and I'm not usually given to poetry. But as I'd sit down to pray about some great need, he'd just flow something through me. And so it has these poems, and it has about 20 of our great promises. And you'll find those added to this. Thrown in extra, for you have $1 worth in the books. But if you buy them by the cent, you have $1.25 worth for $1. Then we have many of the little extra books, Hearts Aglow. There's one of A Way to Victory out there. I wish we had 50. But that's the fourth one in the books of the subconscious mind. And it deals with the hardest problems we face in life. A mentally retarded child you can bring up to fullness of mentality with any child his age in a year. You have to teach them through the subconscious, but everything you get in the subconscious is given to the conscious, and it quickens the brain and builds it up to perfection. You can redeem any alcoholic in a month's time following that. You can bring any infidel into a perfectly glorious spiritual experience when you follow his way. And so you'll find these little booklets out there. If you mean business, let's take these and let's keep that quiet time every day. And let's see how God's going to use this little group. You may think it's a small group, but there's enough power in this group right here today to change all of California. And when we get California changed, it can change America, can't it? Now, we're going to ask you that if you have some prayer requests that you'd like to make, somebody you'd like to bring to Jesus, and all, that's all they did. They just brought them to Jesus. They didn't diagnose the case. They didn't explain it. They just brought them to Jesus. We can take these prayer requests that you have, and we'll lay them on the altar. And this afternoon, we're going to make a prayer. We're going to bring every one of them to Jesus. And then after the service, they will be burned and given to him. And no one will know anything about it but you and God. And so if you have anything in your heart that you'd like to bring to Jesus, write it on a piece of paper. I believe it's provided there. And they will be taken up. I believe an offering is to be taken, and you could put it in the offering basket. And they will be collected and put on the altar. This afternoon we will have a prayer for all of them. We'll give them to Jesus. But now if you do, you give them to him. And every time you think of this problem, thank him. Praise him. Rejoice that he has taken it, that he knows the way, that he wants to make this right more than you want it right. And as long as you give him the material to work with, and that's gratitude and praise and adoration and rejoicing, not petition. Every time you ask again, you're taking it away from him. You're losing the victory every time you ask again. Don't keep on asking, but keep on thanking and praising and adoring and rejoicing. And there isn't anything he can't take care of.